Hey there, guys. It's me, Dirt Muffin, back for chapter 17 of the Golden Armor. Here we go. Comet woke the next day, more exhausted than before he went to bed. The memories of Nova still tormented him as he forced himself out of the bed, wishing just to have some silence. The shower of scalding hot water barely registered on his mind, which was pressed against the tile wall. After 10 minutes of that, Comet was dejectedly putting on his armor, watching his orange pelt magically shimmer to a brilliant white. He grimaced, thinking of what Nova would say, seeing him like this. The world he was in felt far away, like he was watching it through a telescope. As he left the bunk room, he turned back to his bunk and subsequent footlocker and murmured, "Goodbye, Nova. I'll be back soon, okay?" The mess hall wasn't the same today. Every pony was talking as normal, but Comet couldn't hear them. The food had no taste, which was no surprise, but it felt odd when he ate a ripe apple along with 2 sugar cubes and his tongue didn't register there was food. Once he finished, he walked away slowly to his post, guarding Philomena. The hallway was long and winding, but just seemed to go by without catching his attention at all. Soon, he was outside Philomena's door, when he pushed it open, Comet was greeted by several loud caws and a happy-looking Philomena who nipped at his tail. Comet ignored it and went to his spot and planted his rump and waited. Philomena tilted her head at him and got off her perch, curious to see why he wasn't being himself. She cautiously approached him, half expecting him to startle her, but soon less than a foot away. Philomena often had trouble reading pony expressions, but even she knew what a tear on his face meant. She caught at him, hoping to catch his attention, but Comet kept his eyes fixed on the ground. Philomena had seen Celestia like this before and did what she did to Celestia. The phoenix rubbed her head against Comet's shoulder and backed away, hoping to garner a reaction. Comet just stared sadly at the ground, and Philomena left him alone after that. On the other side of the spectrum, Valerie was still asleep. Half asleep. Her less-than-ideal kiss with Comet from the night before had started to leave a bad taste in her mouth. She knew Comet had taken Angel out on a date, but tried to suppress the thoughts. Maybe she let it drop, there would be no reason for it to be brought up. When the door to Philomena's chamber came into view, Valerie took a deep breath. With an increasing sense of nausea in her stomach, the Griffin pushed the door open. Inside the room, she noticed the absence of Angel immediately, but saw the familiar golden armor and white pelt of Comet sitting on the floor with a worried-looking phoenix. "Hi, Valerie," came the clearly sad voice of Comet. The Griffin panicked and rushed up to Comet, half expecting him to be hurt. "Oh, my Griffin, Comet, are you okay?" she asked worriedly. She reached out a claw to see his face, but a hoof shot up to block her. "I'm fine," Comet said, without meeting her gaze. "I just want some silence, okay?" Valerie gulped and nodded, even though Comet wasn't looking at her, and withdrew her claw. She slowly backed away from him, worried he was going to lash out at her about yesterday. The horrible thought of he and Angel fighting climbed into her mind, and Valerie made the connection. Evidently, Comet had told Angel what had transpired, and she reacted as expected. She had probably broken up with him and yelled at him and made him feel guilty. This also explains why Angel wasn't here at the time, too. Valerie gulped hard and sat at the opposite end of the room, leaving a very confused Philomena unattended. Angel was actually snoring slightly as she slept soundly in the empty barracks. She had gotten back really late last night after the Princess Cadence and Shining Armor's dinner and was now dreaming. In her thoughts, a young Comet sat there crying to himself as he sat near a headstone. Angel stood back away and tried to call out to him, but Comet seemed not to notice. Angel then tried running up to him, but she never gained any ground. The young Comet just sat there, weeping to himself, even as Angel tried to tell him it wasn't his fault. The day passed with little happening aside from Philomena and Valerie spending some time together. The Griffin wanted so badly to ask what happened, but the fear of him getting angry at her stayed her voice. Comet, for his part, sat on the floor trying his best to push out Nova from his mind, but with little success. His beloved big sister stayed at the fore, taunting his already hurt spirit. About half an hour before the shift ended, Angel woke up, determined to talk to Comet. She had to tell him she knew about his deep, dark secret, and she was going to help him with it. She sped off to Comet, who she could only guess was up in Philomena's tower. Well, I guess we'll be going now, Comet. You okay by yourself? Valerie asked, hoping to get a reaction from him. Comet just sat there in his usual silence, and Valerie smiled weakly as she left. It was still early, but she did have to use the restroom like all living creatures. Angel darted up the opposite hallway and stopped at the door just after Valerie turned the corner. It was then the bad pony realized she had not thought of a way to tell him she knew of his sister, but she barged in anyways. Philomena called happily at her arrival, but Angel's big gold eyes automatically locked onto the white Pegasus sitting on the floor. Comet! Angel exclaimed as she rushed over to him. Comet just sat there, lost in the darkness of his own thoughts, before he noticed a gray hoof reach over and move his head. Soon he was staring at the familiar gold of Angel's eyes, and he yanked his head out of her grasp, returning his gaze to the floor. Yeah? What do you want, Angel? He asked, with no intention of hearing an answer. The bat pony backed up a bit, clearly flustered by Comet's behavior. I kinda, Angel said, unsure of how to tell him she knew about Nova. Clearly Comet was in no mood to talk, but Angel felt she had to say something. Comet, I met your parents last night, she stated flatly, and Comet's head gave a slight shake. Okay, you want a medal or something? Comet retorted with an edge. Angel gulped and continued. Comet, I know about her. Who? Your parents told me about your big sister, Nova, Angel said, voice filled with uncertainty. That got Comet's attention. His head snapped up. Angel had pestered Comet before, too, when he was irritated, but the look he gave her was one well past his usual reaction. His eyes were full of sadness and anger. His face was locked into a scowl. Where did you hear that name? He hissed, barely concealing his anger. I said your parents told me, Angel responded a bit defensively. Comet's face hardened even further than sunstorms had yesterday. Get away from me, he growled, breaking his gaze. Angel took a step forward before Comet shouted, Get away from me! Now! A look of hurt crossed Angel's face as she stepped back once. Comet took several deep breaths and cursed under his breath at his parents. Nova was not something for them to tell Comet's friends, no matter the circumstances. Comet, why are you... Angel started to ask. I don't care what you're gonna say. I don't want to talk about her. Comet shouted, his angry gaze coming back to Angel. Her face registered more hurt, and that only fueled Comet's anger. Comet, if you just listen, Comet tried to say before Comet cut her off. No, you listen, he growled, now baring his teeth. You don't know what it's like. You don't know. My parents don't know. Those stupid doctors didn't know. Oop. They've never had to pull the pony they love the most back to their home, knowing each second they spend is one less for her to stay alive. They've never sat at a dying pony's bedside for days, watching them slowly die and feeling helpless. They don't know. Comet finished with a shout loud enough to scare both Angel and Philomena, as well as Valerie standing outside the door. Angel looked back at him with a couple tears starting to roll down her cheeks and tried to say something before Comet turned away from her. Don't you ever think you can sympathize with me. My sister was in my care, and I failed her. My failure cost her her life, and I've continuously been told it wasn't my fault when I know that's a lie. I could have stopped her that day, but I didn't. Comet repressed his own sadness welling up by using his anger to drown it out, and press on. Just get out, Angel. Don't ever talk about her again. Angel stared at him, defeated and upset. This was not how she wanted this conversation to go, and now Comet was furious with her. More than she had ever seen. Philomena gently got off her perch and approached Comet, but he aimed a kick at her, and the phoenix cawed in terror and flew back to the other side of the room. Angel wanted to give him a hug, but feared for her own safety after that. Instead, she gave a sob and opened the door, bolting away from the room, past Valerie, who stared at her running down the hallway. Valerie slowly turned her head to Comet in the room, who had his back turned to her. Unknown to Valerie, Comet stood there, biting his lower lip as hard as he could stand, trying desperately to hold back the horrible emotions he felt. His anger had burned itself out on Angel's sob, and now he felt a gaping hole in his chest. The sadness from the memories of Nova were mixing with his own feelings of hate for himself for yelling at Angel like that. She was only trying to help, but Comet had pushed her away like he did his mother and father. Finally, unable to restrain himself any longer, Comet gave several choked sobs, and Valerie stood there, unsure of what she was seeing. She had thought Comet and Angel were fighting over her, but it was starting to dawn on her that maybe they were fighting about some other pony. Philomena walked over to Valerie, clearly wanting to leave him alone, and Valerie extended a claw. Philomena climbed up her claw and onto her shoulder, finding a good place to perch herself. The griffin cast one last look at Comet, who was clearly in no state to see any pony/griffin, and she slowly shut the door, leaving him alone. She walked off, cooing to an upset phoenix as she walked back to the bunks, hoping to comfort Angel. Comet lost all track of time as he stood there, unwilling to bring himself back from where he had gone. Years of sadness and self-hatred just gripped at him, unwilling to let go. He needed his sister now more than ever, but she was 6 feet under the ground back in San Francisco. In his depressed state, Comet's mind flitted back to memories of Nova after the funeral. Nova's funeral. He remembered his mother hugging him tightly as she cried, his father standing outside with him, watching the sunset. While he needed his sister now, he felt a longing for his parents, while he remembered the arguments they had as well. He remembered the anger he had erupted with when his parents were upset about him catching hypothermia, the hurt look of his mother as he yelled at her, and his father's apologies for what had happened that day. Most of all, he reflected on Angel. All she had done was profess the knowledge of Nova, not offer sympathy. Comet was in no mood to talk about Nova today, or any day for that matter, but he treated her unfairly. In truth, he knew next to nothing about Angel, and reacted as if he knew what she was going to say. The bitterness of his anger had left the worst sour taste in his mouth, and Comet knew he had to apologize to Angel. However, the memories of all the arguments that he and his parents had stuck to the fore of his mind. He shakily rose to his hooves and spread his crumpled wings. He did need to mend those relationships with Angel, but first he had to see his parents. Comet pushed open a window and flapped his wings, disappearing into the night. He knew where his parents were staying, and so he made his way into town. Okay, guys, okay. That's chapter 17 of The Golden Armor. Thank you guys for listening. So yeah, I just wanted to point out some things now. You didn't catch my little post there a while back. I will be doing daily uploads now. That probably won't be an issue at this point anymore. I'll just ask people to be a bit quieter and whatever, and I'll try not to yell. I can't get too loud. But yeah, daily uploads will come, so I'll probably end up doing, say, maybe 1 to 2 chapters a day. That sounds fair. Maybe more if I feel like it at the time, or if I have the time, say, so to speak. But in any case, thank you guys for listening. Thanks for sticking with me, and yeah, have a happy Christmas. Merry Christmas. Yeah, that shit. Good Lord.